Okay, could we take our seats, please? Let's get started. Good evening. How are you all this evening? Nancy Hess stopped me on the way up. She said, are all these people here to pay their taxes? I said, no, town meeting was last week. They've already paid their taxes. And they said, gee, that's kind of interesting. We schedule town meeting and spend all the money, and then the next week we pay our taxes. But tonight, what we're going to do is have Candidates Night. And Candidates Night, this is the second annual Candidates Night on the new venue. SOS, Sustain Our Sherborn, is sponsoring this. And SOS is 5 years old this spring. And our charter was to educate the voters, to raise issues of importance to the town, financial, structural, governance, and so forth, to try to get the people involved, knowing what some of the issues are, acting on some of those issues. So here we are tonight, second annual Candidates Night. We've got a good turnout here. We have a lot of candidates who are running for office, and we have a moderator tonight. Some of you may not know the moderator tonight, but his name is George Fiske, otherwise known as Mr. Sherborn. So George, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's get started.
Okay, Frank, thanks very much. And thank you all for showing up tonight. It's nice to see a good gang here tonight for this event. We are going to be spending, I hope, the majority of the evening having candidates who are running for two offices where there are contests. But before we do that, I'm going to run through very quickly those people who were the caucus nominees, and in the order in which it is we present it at Town Caucus. And I'm also going to suggest that as I go through the names, if the name I read, you are here, if you'd let me know so I can at least recognize you, and if you're so inclined and want to spend a minute saying something about yourself, we'd be happy to hear it. I would just invite you to sit up at the chair where Frank just was at that microphone. So as I go through, for moderator, Corey Lincoln is the caucus nominee. Under selectman, I'm doing that. Well, I'm doing it. It's been suggested that I also need to introduce people who've taken out papers, and I certainly will be doing that. Matter of fact, that's part of the reason I want to go through this with you. In addition, for selectmen, we have two people who are the caucus nominees: Mike Giamo and Sean Colleen. Nancy Hess is the caucus nominee for collector. Nancy, did you want to say anything? Or
Mike's here.
I'm sorry, Mike's here as well.
Mike's here. I'm here, George.
Oh, you're here. Okay, Mike, there you are. And if either one of you have anything especially that you want to say, we'd be delighted to hear from you.
No, I said plenty.
Nancy, sure. Right up where Frank was. That'd be great.
I never pass up the opportunity to say something. For one thing, if you haven't paid your taxes yet, I'm going to be downstairs for a little while. But the other thing I want to point out is it's important for people to vote, even when there are uncontested races. For me, it's always a referendum on the job that I'm doing, and I always appreciate it when I hear from the community that I still have their support. I've been very fortunate to enjoy your support for a long time, and I would appreciate it if you would remember to vote this time too. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. The caucus nominee for town treasurer is Heather Peck. Is Heather here? No. For assessors, which was a bit interesting this year, in that we had two resignations during the last year from the board, and the remaining assessor, Ken McDonough, whose term was up, opted not to rerun. So we do have a caucus nominee for a 3-year term, and that's Dhruv Kashal, who is here and would, I think, like to not only be recognized but say a few words. Dhruv.
Hi everyone. I'll keep it quick. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Dhruv Kashal. I'm running unopposed for the 3-year term on the Board of Assessors. So a little bit about myself. I'm a lawyer, formerly licensed as a CPA. I'm interested in subject matter. I think in some other settings that might be, a little bit suspect, but I think in this setting it'll serve me very well. I look forward to contributing and to meeting all you guys.
Drew, thank you very much. For the 2-year term on assessors, the caucus nominee is Michael Goldstein, and I suspect Michael would be here if he could, but he is out of the country and not due back for a while yet. But he is the caucus nominee for the 2-year term. On the 1-year term, we did not have a caucus nominee, but we did have someone who took out papers. And his name is Bill Seymour. I have not seen Bill here. Is Bill here?
He's out of town.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
point of order, he didn't take out papers?
I'm sorry,
He
yes.
is a declared write-in candidate.
Right. He is a declared write-in candidate, which is another way of running. So he will be seeking support for the 1-year term. On the school committee, we're going to pass over that momentarily. We will be coming back to that shortly. Trustees of Samhain Academy, the caucus nominee is David Welch. David here. Under library trustees, there are 3, Stacy Brandon, Carrie Toney, and Christina Almy. Under water commissioner, big surprise, Roger Demler. Cemetery commission, another big surprise, Chucky Blaney is the caucus nominee. For planning board, it is John Higley, and for some reason I'm missing the second candidate.
Addie May.
Pardon?
Addie May.
Addie May, of course, and I saw Addie May here. There she is. Addie, would you like something to say something?
Just say that I'm Addie Mae Weiss. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve on a board in a town. I've learned so much from a lot of people throughout the past year, and I realize I have much more to learn, but we have a great town and a great, great support for making it even better. So.
Thank you, Addie. Caucus nominee for Dover Sherborn Regional Schools, Claire Graham. Claire here? No? And we'll skip over Board of Health again and come back to that later this evening. Recreation Commission, we have 2 members for caucus nominees. I believe one for a 3-year term and one for I believe it was a 1-year term, but it is Bo O'Connell and Mike Guthrie. And then under constables, both for a 3-year term, Ronald Buckler and Josh Buckler. So, thank you for speaking up, those of you who did. Yes?
George, the library trustees, I believe you didn't name them all, did you? Have Brian Conlon?
And with her.
Did I miss them? I'm sorry. Who did I miss?
You listed 3 names with them.
They're the wrong ones? Library trustees,
Yes.
Stacy Brandon, Carrie Toney, Christine Allen. Yeah, also, okay, thank you. Well, we have a lot to cover tonight with these 2 different contested boards. What I would like to do is to first see if we could have a discussion amongst the 3 people running for the school committee. And they are Jennifer Debin, Kate Potter, and Zach Spilman. And if the 3 of them would come up and take seats up here, that would be great. I've asked each of them if they would give us a couple of minutes each to speak about themselves and why they're running for school committee. And then what I did in not only with the Board of Health, but also the school committee, for questions, I asked each one of them to give me up to 3 questions that they would like to present to discuss tonight. questions that they would like themselves to be able to answer, or questions that they would like the other candidates to answer. So each of them has done that, and I will use those questions as the basis for the discussion tonight. If we get through this in short order, shorter than I think, then we will entertain motions from the audience by passing out these cards and pencils, and if you'd like to ask a question, you're welcome to. Although frankly, I'm guessing that most of the questions that we're going to be asking that I have here are probably going to cut to the heart of the matter with the various issues that you're faced with going forward. So whether we actually do entertain those questions will be largely dependent upon time. Yes? Oh, you want a card?
George, just a clarifying question. I think I know the answer, but I don't think I heard you say how many positions they're running for.
There are three candidates, and I'll introduce each one, but there are three candidates running for two positions. They're 3-year terms. And Jennifer, who is furthest from me, is one of the caucus nominees for school committee, and Kate Potter is the other. And then Zach Spilman did take out papers to run in that instance. So we've got 3 people running for those 2 positions. And I would also ask, as I have the questions, I know it's sometimes difficult to be succinct, but as direct as you feel you can be, that will help. I do have somebody over here, Jim Campbell, will be raising a card if we go over a 2 or 3 minute limit that we're going to try to have as a self-imposed limit. But and so I'm looking for this to be a good, healthy discussion tonight. And I will start with Jennifer, and if you just be kind enough, Jennifer, to talk a little bit about why you were running.
Okay. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm not used to the microphone yet. Hi, I'm Jennifer Defin. I'm one of the 2 caucus nominees on the May 10th ballot for the Sherborn School Committee. I graduated with honors from Boston College, where I met my husband, Ryan. We moved our family to Sherborn 9 years ago and have 4 young boys. A 3rd grader, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner at Pine Hill, and a 4-year-old. In 2017, all 4 of my children will be enrolled at Pine Hill. We have been extremely active in the community in various capacities over the years, from making salads for COA lunches, to coordinating playgroups, to youth soccer, to playground fundraising, and of course many hours spent at Pine Hill. In addition to our volunteer efforts, we are successful small business owners with 4 local children's gyms and 1,500 members, reflecting our deep commitment to family and childhood wellness. I have experience as a preschool educator and an art teacher, and have an understanding of child development and an appreciation for the value of arts in education. As a child, I attended public schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, and I believe in the public school system. For the last 2 years, I've been on the Pine Hill School Advisory Council, working closely with Principal Barbara Brown, Vice Principal Frank McGordy, Guidance Counselor Maury Freeman, several teachers, fellow parents, and community members. As a member of the Advisory Council, I consulted on crucial issues such as enrollment, the budget, student health and wellness, curriculum, homework, standardized testing, and more. While we did not always share the same views, we learned from each other, and our work together has benefited the Pine Hill community. My experience on the Advisory Council highlights my ability to collaborate with a variety of stakeholders, and has provided me with the deep understandings of the working of Pine Hill and the region. I am one of 2 parent liaisons from Pine Hill for Challenge Success, an important and groundbreaking program out of Stanford that our district has signed on with that asks us to re-examine what success means. Through the Challenge Success program, I have begun working with teachers, guidance staff, administration, and parents at the middle and high schools as well. And I recently coordinated a well-attended event with Chickering for elementary parents with a lineup of expert guest speakers. My family greatly enjoys our responsibility of being a co-host family for an awesome 2nd grade student from Boston through the METCO program. And you can often find me volunteering in the Pine Hill classrooms and the library, and accompanying field trips with a huge smile on my face. Beyond Pine Hill, I'm a member of the statewide advocacy group Citizens for Public Schools, and I'm involved with Horizons for Homeless Children. I am continually reading, researching, and learning about the latest in education policy and child development, and have a deep interest in issues relating to public schools locally, nationally, and internationally. I'm almost finished here, sorry. The role of Sherborn School Committee member will put my knowledge and passion for education to work for you. As a business owner, parent, educator, and experienced school advisory council member, I have a lifelong love of learning, a knack for creative problem solving, and collaboration skills that would be a good fit for our school committee. I'm dedicated to our town, and as a Sherborn School Committee member, I will represent our residents and see it as my responsibility to be available to listen to you. I actively participated in the public superintendent hearings this year and welcome the opportunity to be involved in the
Okay,
important
please,
duty.
just wait.
Sorry, many of you don't know me at all, so I'm just trying to wrap it up here.
Jennifer, why don't we, well,
Okay.
that's good, thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
And Kate, would you like to do the same?
Great. My name is Kate Potter. My family and I have lived in Sherborn for about 10 years now. I graduated from Teachers College, Columbia University, with my master's in teaching and instruction. And I taught for almost 10 years in both public and private schools before having my first child, who is now, yesterday, turned 14. I also attended all public schools growing up. I have a daughter in 8th grade, so she'll be going into the high school next year, a son in 6th grade, and a son in 2nd grade, so I'm going to have a foot in each school for a while. Since moving to Sherborn, I have been involved in a lot of different community groups. I was a member of the Friends of the Sherborn Library for several years as the children's coordinator, which fit closely with my background. And I don't think I mentioned that my degree is in K-5 elementary education, and I still hold a valid Mass State teaching license. So I enjoyed working on the Friends of the Sherborn Library Board, enjoyed working with the group. We often overlapped with the trustees, which was exciting because it was the very beginning time where the renovation was being discussed. I am also in my 3rd year of being the Metco liaison for the Pine Hill School. I greatly enjoy working with the students and the families who live in Boston who attend our schools. And that's a CSA role at Pine Hill, so I've been on the CSA in that role for 3 years. I also work with the Dover-Sherborn Metco director, Monique Marshall-Veal, as a liaison for the middle and high school. And that's really neat because you get to watch the kids go through Pine Hill and then they get to the middle school and you already know them, you know the families, and I really enjoy that work. Just this year, I was invited to become a member of the Sherborn Benevolent Society, and I'm fairly new there, but I'm loving that work, really amazed by the generosity of the people on that board and their depth of caring for people in this town. So I feel that between being an educator, a parent, and a Sherborn community member for quite a while and a member of several committees that I understand how the town works and how the school works and would be honored to be on the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Zach?
Thank you. I'm Zachary Spilman, and I'm running for the Sherborn School Committee because I believe in smaller class sizes and fiscal responsibility. I spent most of the past 10 years on active duty in the Marine Corps. After graduating from UMass Amherst in 2003 and from Suffolk Law in 2006, I was a judge advocate from 2007 through 2014, mostly in North Carolina and Afghanistan. I'm currently a major in the Marine Corps Reserve, and I'm an attorney in private practice. I moved to Sherborn last year with my wife Christina and our 2 boys Daniel and Jacob, who are the redheads over there. Daniel's in 3rd grade in Pine Hill, and Jacob's in 1st grade. Daniel is 9 years old. He's lived in 7 different houses, but Sherborn is our home. Pine Hill faces a number of very serious challenges. Over the past few years, enrollment has dropped significantly. However, spending has risen. It's unsustainable. Now enrollment is on the rise, and we're facing a budget crunch. Solving this problem is going to require new ideas and a fresh perspective. I believe that the most important resource in our elementary school are the classroom teachers. Class size isn't the only thing that matters, but it's one of the most visible attributes of a school. Similarly, Pine Hill is one of the most visible aspects of our town. Education spending is our largest municipal expense, and the quality of our schools has a big influence on our property values. But I'm also concerned about our town finances and our already high property taxes. The Pine Hill student population is growing faster than our town's budget, and the Sherborn School Committee will have to make some very difficult choices. I know how to make tough choices, and I am committed to an honest and open debate about our priorities. I will ask tough questions, I will find creative solutions, and I will balance the needs of our young students with the realities of our town finances. I ask for your support and for your vote next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Here's a question for each of you. And again, these are questions that have been submitted by the candidates themselves. How would you approach an issue where the board was divided in opinion? Anybody like to answer that first?
I'll go ahead. It's inevitable that the committee will from time to time be divided. I would listen openly to all opinions. I would gather facts and data, talk to parents and community members, as well as any relevant groups that the decision would impact directly, to hear their input. Then I'd make an informed judgment based on what is best for the community as a whole. If needed, I would ask for an additional meeting on the topic for further clarity.
So I would approach the issue bluntly and with facts. I'm an attorney. Most of my work is criminal appeals. I'm used to confronting opposing views and arguing a position, and that's what we need on our school committee right now. Moreover, really as an outsider, I'm the best qualified person to bring us new ideas and a fresh perspective. Again, we are facing a serious budget crisis. Enrollment dropped significantly while spending rose significantly. And we can't just keep doing more of the same, or the thing's going to collapse on itself.
I've been on several committees and in several positions where people had different opinions, and I think you need to do your own homework and research and gather the facts, but I also think you need to look to the people who have been on the different committees for years and similar issues have been encountered in the past. How were they approached? How were they solved? I think there are a lot of creative ways where you can be fiscally responsible and still meet the needs of the students in the best way that you possibly can.
And to each of you, what do you anticipate will be a hot topic for a school committee, and how would you approach that hot topic?
Well, it's going to be class size. Pine Hill's enrollment right now is about 387 students, but historic enrollment is closer to 470. The enrollment's risen over the past few years, but it's going to rise a lot more. The real estate market's really hot. There's a lot of pressure from developers, including a couple of 40B projects, and classes are just getting bigger. Last November, we had a third grade class, Daniel's class actually, that had 25 students in it. And at multiple meetings, dozens of parents came in to this room and at the school and almost protested the lack of action on it. I asked the school committee at those meetings to state a clear policy on the maximum number of students that we should have in a class at Pine Hill, but they wouldn't do it. But I'll do it right now. There should be no more than 20 students in a class at Pine Hill. Our property taxes are more than high enough to make that happen. And I think it's the school committee's responsibility to make the numbers work.
The hot topic?
I agree with Zach that there will be continued concern around growth in class size with more children moving in than moving out. This year's net in-migration was 36 students compared to 21 the year before. But I also think that MCAS 2.0 is slated to be introduced, and I foresee discussion around that. Tied to that, I expect discussion on state standards. Interestingly, Michigan is poised to drop the Common Core and adopt Massachusetts' old standards. Overall, health and wellness of our young learners will also be at the forefront with conversation around play-based kindergarten, elementary homework, initiated by our district's involvement in the Challenge Success program. And of course, the teacher's contract is up for renegotiation, but This all being said, the overarching hot topic for me has to be superintendent selection. There was a search this year that did not pan out, and I was involved in that at the public hearings. So next year's search will be crucial in finding a visionary leader for our district. All other school issues directly relate to having the right superintendent in place. We are lucky to have the waiver approved for a second year with the interim superintendent, Bill McAuliffe. But to move forward as a school and a district, we need to hire someone permanently. I anticipate a similar process to last year, starting with including community members and staff in the search with open public brainstorming sessions, and then interviews with candidates that have been identified by our consultants as potential matches. The process then goes to public hearings with the finalists before a superintendent is chosen, and that choice is going to be a crucial one for our school and our district.
Okay.
Well, I think the two biggest topics have already been mentioned, the class size and the superintendent search. For class sizes, we were happy, well, a lot of parents were happy to see that the budget passed recently with having two new full-time classroom educators. I think there are a lot of creative ways to keep class sizes down and keep costs down, and I think that the school committee is committed to keeping being financially responsible and also being responsible for getting the children the best education they can get. There are a lot of different things you can do, be creative. There are multi-age classrooms, there are age sharing, there are different things that I know people will consider. And as for the superintendent search, that's going to be an exciting year, I think. The superintendent can set the tone for the entire district, and there's really a trickle-down effect. So I think that's going to be something we're going to spend a lot of time on.
So are you not going to ask the class size question? Should I address that now?
Sure.
Okay. For class size, Pine Hill's mission statement currently says a commitment to favorable class size. And the current recommendation, I believe, was not looked at in the last decade. So it has become a hot topic again. And right now, it's for up to 25 students where practical, which leaves room for possibly even more than that. Right now, they say K through 3, 18 to 23 kids, for grades 4 to 5, 20 to 25. Dover's policy is slightly different in the range of 17 to 22 students per class. If research is to guide us, the data from the Center for Public Education says no more than 18 students in K through 3 for the greatest benefit, and the Massachusetts State Foundation for Elementary is in the low 20s. I believe it's time to readdress this. I have heard from parents on multiple occasions that they believe, like Zach said, that the larger class sizes are directly affecting the education that their children are receiving, and they feel that at a certain point it's becoming detrimental. So I understand that changes sometimes happen mid-year. We have to balance class size and fiscal responsibility, but during this school year, 14 students enrolled during the year. So like Kate mentioned, there have to be creative ways to get around that, like aides being introduced into the classroom, multi-age classrooms, and it's important that class size reduction not be considered in a vacuum, but it has to be paired with other effective school practices and strong teachers. Ultimately, I do think class size needs to be addressed this coming year. Data supports it, parents and students are directly affected by it, and we need to figure out how to balance it within our budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can we talk a little bit more about the superintendent search and how you see that going forward? Each of you?
Sure. Well, I was involved in both the brainstorming sessions and the public hearings
Go ahead, Jennifer.
for the superintendent search this past winter. And though our district did not end up hiring either of the finalists, it was an interesting and important process that I look forward to delving into again as a school committee member. A strong collaborative leadership between the school committee and the superintendent is necessary in order to deal with challenges facing our school, and the superintendent decision is a vital one. We have a critical decision to make. We're lucky to have Bill as our interim on the waiver. but we need to find a district leader with a commitment to our schools. To me, the key considerations are an ability to work effectively in our challenging situation, because we have 3 separate school committees that the superintendent has to balance out. I need a leader. I'm looking for a leader with vision and long-term goal setting, and that.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, we weren't aware that there was a time limit
These
when we were
are
preparing.
important
I'm
questions.
sorry.
We do have time, so I'd like to give them each a chance to really speak their mind.
I apologize.
That's all right.
I wasn't aware of the time limit until I arrived, so I prepared some statements that.
Just to clarify, because there does seem to be some confusion, I have been giving everybody up to 2 minutes to answer a question. Is that what you want?
2 to 3, I think, is fine. Now,
2 to 3 is hard to count.
well, again, these are important questions, and I'd rather, let's keep going and let's hear what
I
people
apologize. I'm
have to
just wrapping
say.
this up. I did not receive a time limit notification until I arrived today. So
Okay, let's keep moving along. Jennifer, do you have more on that?
I was just going to wrap it up here. So a superintendent that supports our Challenge Success program and understands our position as a leader in education in Massachusetts and nationwide, and has a combination of business and budgeting, organizational acumen, as well as a child development background and education experience, and is a staunch advocate and supporter of our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, would you like to?
Yes,
Speak a
thank
little
you. I think we would be looking for someone who's had a long history of great experience. People, teachers and administrators get to a district like Dover-Sherborn and usually they don't want to leave. I know I can speak as a teacher. When you get to a district like this, you generally want to stay, and we're lucky that most of our teachers and staff feel that way. So I would be looking for someone who has a lot of great experience, someone with very high standards for themselves and for the teachers. I think it's critical that a superintendent is open to new ideas as well as bringing their own experience, things that have worked really well where they've been in the past. They need to be able to work well with the principals and in turn then work well with the staff. I've taught at schools where I felt very supported by the principal and the superintendent, and I've taught at schools where I didn't feel as supported by the superintendent and the principal, and it's really a whole nother ballgame in terms of what you can do in the classroom, what you're comfortable with, even your interactions with the parents of the students. And I would want to try to find somebody who wanted to be here for a long time, because I think we've just been through a bunch of transitions, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know what's going to happen in someone's life, but to go through the search again, as Jennifer pointed out, the last one was not fruitful, to really get someone that we feel good about, who's going to stay and really dig in.
Zach?
So the question, I believe, was how do I feel about the superintendent search? And my answer is that I think we should finish it.
Okay. The contract with the teachers union will expire next year. What parts of the current contract should stay the same in the next contract? What parts do you think should change?
So there are a bunch of provisions in the current contract that reward longevity among our educators, and I think that we should keep those. I think it's important to recognize and reward people who are loyal to our school system. The thing that I think should change, though, is that all of the salaries for educators in the Dover-Sherborn system are determined according to a matrix. That matrix is based on qualifications and experience. It's not at all based on the actual job that they're doing. And I believe that our contract should include some flexibility for us to make pay based on the actual job performed, not merely the qualifications of the person who performs it.
Kate?
Well, to echo what Zach said, the teacher scale is based on their years of experience and their years of education. And because teachers generally love working in Dover and Sherborn, they do tend to stay. And so we do end up with teachers who we're paying a fair amount because they're at the bottom right hand, they're highly educated and they've been here for a while. They end up costing us more. On the one hand, those are the teachers we want. They've got the most experience, the most education. On the other hand, it does cost the town more. I fully agree that teachers should be held accountable for the job they do. I know that at Pine Hill, Dr. Brown has different ways of evaluating teachers. I know in the different districts I taught in, we were evaluated in many different ways, and I think it's important to keep that in place, to keep high standards for teachers, high accountability, and then there are a lot of other things that go into the contract that, well, I personally would need to learn about. I would need to learn from the administration, the superintendent, the people who have been on the school committee. What are the hot issues within the contracts? What's on the table? Is it the health care, other benefits, that kind of thing? And I'd work to learn more about it and go from there.
Jen?
I've read through the teacher contract, and it is available online if any of you are interested to learn more about what we're talking about up here. It is a sensitive topic. It is a negotiation with at first the 16 joint school committee members, researching, asking questions, working together, setting goals, and figuring out what is going to happen in the next contract. So at this point, none of us really know what changes are going to happen, but it's a process that we use here is the collaborative bargaining process, which is more of a teamwork approach with the teachers rather than the adversarial collective bargaining approach. And so a lot of thoughtful discussion goes into the contract negotiation, and like Kate mentioned, I would look forward to learning more about the actual process. If chosen for school committee, there is a training session at the Massachusetts Association of School Committees that we would attend, and we would learn about specifics around budgeting and negotiation so we could better address anything that comes up there. But for most of the aspects in our contract, they're similar to other contracts in the state if you compare them. Our pay scale is on the high end, that's true. It hasn't changed drastically in several years though, and it enables us to attract and retain excellent teachers while Newton, for example, is struggling with teacher turnover and their pay scale is quite a bit lower. So a lot of topics up for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question here. Will you support a Proposition 2.5 override to pay for Pine Hill's operating expenses? Somebody like to take that one on?
Sure, I'll take that on. I'm aware that this has happened in the past. I don't believe it's currently on our horizon. I think if that were to come up, the school committee would work closely with the administration and the advisory board to be as creative as they could be financially before having to go to that measure. There are a lot of different creative ways that you could try to help alleviate class size, some of which were mentioned earlier, that you would hopefully be able to go through before getting to that point. But that's something that the school committee would not decide on solely. That would be really a larger decision of the town and the advisory committee.
Well, my answer is no. I would not support it because we don't need it and it won't work. Pine Hill, I have a binder here full of budgets. I can show them to anyone. The Sherborn School Committee has, for the past 5 or 6 years, the numbers I have available, spent only 90% of its budget. Okay, we don't need an override to fund the day-to-day expenses of the school, nor is it a good idea. Every time we raise our taxes to fund the day-to-day expenses, not a debt exclusion for a new roof or a new wing on the building or something, but the day-to-day operating costs of the school. Every time we raise our taxes to pay for that, we drive people without children out of the town. That means more kids move in, enrollment goes up, and we're right back to where we started again. It's a vicious cycle. And, you know, respectfully, Kate, you should be able to give a straight answer on this. Okay? No, I would not support an operating override for the elementary school.
Well, I think it would depend on what the override was for, so I didn't feel comfortable making a statement.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer?
Obviously, the school committee cannot act on speculation. We can stay on top of changes that are happening in town. The possibility of real estate development and increased enrollment are on everyone's minds. But according to information provided to me by Principal Dr. Brown, there are 27 classrooms available at Pine Hill. Next year, 21 rooms will be used. So there is room for growth in regards to the space available. We might have to look at flexible changes such as the use of the pre-K rooms or possibly even the teacher's lounge. But one of the other considerations may be to think broadly about sharing the funding of certain services across the region and Chickering, which could provide some flexibility in our budgeting. If it was deemed absolutely necessary for our operating budget, and only after all other possible avenues had been explored, such as reduced spending, increasing local fees and charges, finding money-saving efficiencies in town operations, or seeking more money from the state, and all of the pros and cons were weighed on an override and whether it would be sustainable, then I would support it in order to adequately fund Pine Hill. The education of our youngest residents is utmost important in this town and a wise investment in the future. The bottom line is most people do not want to pay more taxes, but caring for and educating the town's children is a priority. If I'm selected to the school committee, I would work with fellow members to ensure the necessary funds are appropriated for our school responsibly and that a balance is maintained between needs and resources. Thank you.
Traditionally, on the last day of school, Pine Hill students receive their class assignments for the next year. That tradition won't occur this year because of uncertainty about the number of teachers in each grade. What will you do to restore this tradition?
Sure. Well, I'm going to hire more teachers. I believe, I might be wrong about this, and I'm sorry if I am, but I think I was the only one of the three of us at the last school committee meeting of the year where they announced this policy change, and I was pretty upset about it. It's because even though we plan to hire 2 additional teachers, realistically we're probably going to need 4, and they can't guarantee how many classes there are going to be in each grade, so they can't give kids the assignments. That's just a bad sort of leadership and guidance to have for the elementary school. So first, I'd hire more teachers, and then I would provide clear guidance to the school and to the community about the number of teachers and the maximum number of kids that we should have in each grade, like I've done so tonight. Right? This is a leadership problem, and I know how to lead.
It's always hard to transition from a familiar routine. However, especially in times of change, it's important to be flexible. Pine Hill staff put an incredible amount of effort and thought into student placement. The truth is, our towns and schools are attractive for families, and with enrollment currently increasing and move-ins happening throughout the summer, for example, last summer there were 25 new students registered during the summer months. It's evident that delaying teacher assignments is preferable to possibly having to be in the position to change a child's teacher after an assignment has been made. Interestingly, Dover stopped their step-up day 2 years ago. There were understandably some complaints, but trying to project fluctuating enrollment is difficult, and waiting to make class decisions was the right thing to do. Instead, a creative variation on the tradition could be established at Pine Hill, such as meeting all the teachers in the next grade, or having each teacher from the next grade come down to the classroom to take over for part of the day. Moving to the next grade can still be a fun and memorable experience with some creativity from the administration and staff. Thank you.
I don't think this is a really difficult issue. I think hiring good teachers and new teachers takes time, and that will be done. This is the first district, I haven't taught in Dover Sherborn, but this is the first district that I had heard of where the kids find out on the last day of school who their teacher was going to be. Growing up, I remember getting that letter in August, running to the mailbox and then calling all your friends. And in the districts where I've taught in the past, it's a similar policy because teachers' lives change. Someone might move, a new person might be hired, new kids might move to town. It's really hard to make those class assignments before the last day of school. So I think one thing Pine Hill could do, and I know Dr. Brown was considering, was still doing a step-up day, but for example, my son who's in second grade, he would go to visit a third grade classroom just to get a sense and overview with the knowledge that this might not be his teacher or the people who he's going to be with, but here are the exciting things you can anticipate about third grade. What we always did, and what I think would be fabulous for Pine Hill, was to have a day or two where before school starts, maybe the last week of August or the week before, where the classrooms were open. School hasn't started yet, but the teacher's there. I remember welcoming in my third grade students in Seattle, and they got to come in, see where their desk's going to be, see who else is in the class, ask me questions. It was fun. It was informal. I think that would be a great solution to this problem.
George, could I follow up on that real quickly?
Sure.
Because, I think there's something that really matters, and that's that at one of the meetings earlier this year, one of the school committee meetings, I think it was January, we had a whole bunch of parents come in, and they were wearing pins that said 4 for 5th. And what those pins were about was the fact that at Pine Hill right now, we've got 4 sections in the 5th grade, so 4 teachers in the 5th grade, and 3 sections in every other grade. And the school committee had, as one of the early proposals, said, hey, maybe we'll move that teacher from the 5th grade to the 4th grade because of that's where the bubble is. That's where the most kids are. The final budget that they announced keeps that teacher in the 5th grade and adds a 4th teacher in the 4th and 3rd grades. And that gives us projected enrollment in 5th grade next year. And these are the best numbers they can come up with based on our current population and their best guesses and their education. But projected class sizes in the 5th grade of 17, 18, 18, and 18. Okay, so that's plenty of room for growth, you would think, right? So of course, they can tell the 4th graders which 5th grade class they'll be in next year. It's the same 4 teachers, it's going to be 17 or 18 kids in a class. We'd need what, 2, 4, 6, 9 kids to get up to 20 in a class? No problem. They won't do it. They won't do it because they don't know if that 4th teacher is really going to be in the 5th grade. So if you're the parent of a 4th grader who's soon going to be a 5th grader, boy, you better really think about what you were told in that meeting in January and that meeting in February when you came in to demand that 4th teacher. Because I don't think you got straight talk. And you deserved straight talk. And from me, you're going to get straight talk.
Okay. Any other comment with regard to that? Okay. I have, before I ask each of you if you'd like to say a little wrap-up, I do have another question, and that is, it has been said that the committee sets the climate for the school. What are your thoughts on this, and what type of climate do you envision?
I'd like to answer that. I actually hadn't heard that phrase before until I read this question. I have always felt as a teacher and as a parent that the principal really sets the tone of the school. And then, when you look beyond that, it's the superintendent who sets the tone because they're working so closely with the principal. But at the elementary school, and a lot of this I touched on before when we were talking about the superintendent search, the principal really does set the tone. He or she sets the tone for the teachers, the high level of standard they expect, their expectations of the way they're going to communicate and interact with parents and students. And that comes down to the teachers and the way the teachers approach the kids. When it's a healthy, happy learning environment and the principal's really happy to be there, it trickles down. The teachers feel it. The teachers feel supported by the principal. They feel excited to teach there. The kids feel it. It's everything. I mean, of course, there are bumps in the road, but things move along, and it's a happy place, and you can really get a sense for it, I think, similarly to if you've ever been to a Pine Hill Friday morning meeting. You get a feel for the happy vibe at the school. And so, well, the school committee does have a lot of interaction with the principal, and we interact a lot with the superintendent. Our main roles are the curriculum, the policy, and the finance. So I think that as a school committee member, would we influence the climate of the school to a point, but I think largely through the principal and the staff.
Thank you, Kate. Jennifer?
I think the question of school climate is an important one because there are a lot of things in our district that can't always be summed up by data. There are a lot of things about a school, as Kate mentioned, like being at the all-school meeting and just the feeling that you get and the health and the wellness of the students and the staff. And the school committee is in a position to lead by example, in combination with the superintendent, getting the right person in there, and the right principal and staff together can set a good climate. When I think about the interactions and the tone of the school committee and how it translates to Pine Hill, I envision what I like to call a culture of inquiry, where curiosity and asking questions are encouraged, where there's an atmosphere of collaboration and creative, thoughtful problem solving. And members prioritize lifelong learning and hands-on involvement between the community and the school. It's ultimately up to all of us, all residents, not just the school committee, to support and encourage the education we value in our town. Thank you.
Zach?
Thank you, George. So I don't believe that the school committee sets the tone for the school. The Pine Hill community is the thousands of students and parents and teachers and people in the community like you who care about the school and who have a hunger for knowledge and who are dedicated to making Pine Hill that great place that it is. And it's tangibles, it's numbers and dollars and desks, but it's intangibles too, like the vibe that you get in the school. The school committee doesn't set that, but they can certainly break it. I think we saw that this year. I think we're seeing some of it with next year. I think the lack of knowing who you're going to be in a class with next year, that step-up day, that's one of those special little intangibles that makes Pine Hill what it is. And we're starting to lose that. And I fear we're going to lose more of it. Look, from 2008 to 2015, enrollment at Pine Hill dropped from 470 to 379. In the exact same time period, spending increased by over $1 million, from $5.43 million spent in 07-08 to $6.6 million budgeted for next year. Okay, that's about a 20% drop in enrollment and a 20% increase in costs. Now, I'm a pretty blunt guy, okay? I mean, I'm a Marine officer, all right? There's a lot of bulldog in me. It's just my personality. I'm sorry about that. But I think that we need a lot more straight talk and honest debate about this issue because we are spending a lot of money, and we are not getting what we're paying for.
I have gone through the questions that I have, and I just want to offer each of you an opportunity with some closing words if you'd care to.
I'd just like to thank you all for coming, and I hope to get to meet more of you. And if you have any questions about me or my candidacy, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us to come and share our thoughts tonight and answer some questions. I'm also open to questions if you think of something later. And I guess I would just ask you to remember, I think that for me, with my background in education, my 10 years spent living here, my kids in the various schools, and my time spent on the Sherborn Library, Friends of the Library, and the Benevolent Society, and being a Met co-liaison, that I really love this town, I love how it works, and I'd love to be a part of the school committee.
So I'm a bit of an outsider. I'm new to town. I think that's a good thing. I bring in new ideas. I bring in a different perspective. Jennifer and Kate have been involved in the school community for a long time. And I know you're grateful for their involvement. I'm grateful for their involvement. Thank you both. But I think that what we need are new ideas. If this election is a popularity contest, I lose. But frankly, if this election is a popularity contest, I don't want to win it. Because the challenges that we're going to face in the next couple of years, the funding issues, the enrollment issues, the developments that are coming, they are going to be difficult challenges. They're going to require dry eyes and a steady hand. I've done that in a lot of places. I'll do that here if you give me the chance. I ask you for your vote on Tuesday, and thank you all for your interest.
I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time. You've obviously put a lot of thought into the questions you gave me that I could present to you, and I think your answers are well thought out. A lot of time and effort went into it, and I really appreciate all three of you being as involved as you are in town, and in particular for the selection for school committee. So a round of applause for all three of you. We're going to move on to the other contested office.
But
which-
George, I have so many more facts and figures here.
Okay, great. We have two people who are joining us tonight. Darrell Beardsley, who is the caucus nominee for the Board of Health, and Bob Murchison, who took out papers for that position. And my question, Pat, of you is, are people sitting where you wanted them to sit, or where they are? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, this is a similar situation where I asked each of them, Bob and Darrell, to give a little thought to questions that they would pose for themselves and for the other as well. So we'll get into that. But before we do, I guess I would ask each one of you if you take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about why you are running for Board of Health. Darrell?
Okay, so I'm Darrell Beardsley. I'll give you just the itty-bitty background on me. I studied environmental sciences, environmental engineering, and also while I was at MIT getting a civil and environmental master's degree, was enrolled in a special program, extended program for technology and policy, because it's not just the engineering, it's not just the science, it's also how you use it, how you apply it. From there, I've worked really around the world, mostly with businesses, but also with governments, helping look at programs of how to enable the kinds of products and services that we get from industry to function in a more environmentally compatible way. Part of that has also put me in touch with what things can go wrong with the environment. So I don't view it as something that we can treat lightly, expect to absorb whatever we want to throw at it without some consequences back to us. So really, I see myself partly as a nerd to be on the Board of Health. The topics are familiar to me, the sciences, the engineering behind it is part of what I do for work as well. And it is important to our health, and I like looking at how we apply that, how we use it, how we can make things happen, but still do it within a way that how can you have a project happen but not negatively affect all the people who are going to live around that project or the people who are going to live at the particular project. And so I think that's my basic goal, is to find some sort of harmony between those two desires. So,
Good. Thank you,
Thank you.
Darrell. Bob? Thank you.
I guess it's been so long, I'm not sure I even remember what I majored in or where I went to college, but I think I'm most famous around here for having been involved in the first multifamily project in, I think, about 20 years. And so that's how I've gotten to know a lot of you over the last 3 or 4 years. And I must say the great joy in that project, even though I'm not a developer by trade, I come from the investment business, I have really, really enjoyed. I didn't know or knew hardly anybody in town in the early years of living here, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a process that, for the most part, has been interesting and enjoyable, and I've met tons of great people. It's been something that I've been proud of thus far, and I'm hoping that I'll be very proud when I'm done in another, hopefully, 6 months. I'm here tonight because I, like Darrell, I'm interested in serving my town. There shouldn't be any question about the fact that Darrell and I are both here to serve the town. I'm here because I have a different perspective on how we should go forward, and hopefully we can articulate that tonight. Both of us can articulate those differences, and if that's not enough for you, you can go on a website that I've put up to try and be even a little more detailed and more articulate. I guess I'm very interested in being focused on governance and on process in the Board of Health. I think that we need to kind of take a turn back towards governance and process, and we'll spend some more time talking about that. And the one thing I would say is that I think the Board of Health over the last couple of years, particularly in the last year, has been in the business of putting out fires, and they've been pretty significant, or at least in one case, a pretty significant fire. It's been a process that I'm not sure went as well as it could have, to be honest. But it went, and Daryl put in a ton of work on that project, and for that we should absolutely be grateful. But what I'd say is that we need to stop putting out fires for a second, and we need to build a new fire department. We need to build a new process, and we need to build, kind of a new organization that when those fires, hopefully we'll have less fires to put out, but when those fires come along, we'll be prepared to deal with them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Moving into the questions that each of you have provided, the first is, what are your goals for the Sherborn Board of Health over the next 3 years? And I would ask either one of you, you can duke out who answers it first.
Sure, I'll go first. If you'll indulge me, in this particular question I am going to read because I want to make sure I get to everything, and I spent a lot of time coming up with these goals and articulating them in a very specific way, so I'm going to just read them quickly for you. First is, I'd like to set a high priority on consistent application of the regulations by the Board of Health and its health agent for fairness, transparency, and to avoid expensive litigation. Number 2, I would like to revise the role of the health agent. I'd like to ensure that the health agent clearly understands state and local regulations and will effectively communicate the issues to BOH clients with a problem-solving approach. Require the agent to work at Town Hall, to be readily available to consult with a problem-solving approach. To consult with Sherborn residents and other town officials on how to address issues under BOH purview. Require that all inquiries to the Board of Health be acknowledged within 2 business days and answered with a plan of action. I think my experience has been that it sometimes takes 3 or 4 weeks to get answers on fairly straightforward questions. Number 3, and this is really important, appoint a citizens committee to review current regulations with outside consultants as needed, and I realize that could cost a small amount of money, but I think it'll be well worth it. Then advise on potential updates. So the Board of Health would not take on this work. We'd bring in a set of folks, people that are very smart and able to write very well and go through and articulate a set of regulations that we can be proud of going forward. In particular, the committee should review Sherborn's approach to groundwater adjustments because we use an absolutely archaic method to make groundwater adjustments. And it's kind of the hidden part of our regulations that many folks don't know about. Let's see, 4th, provide Board of Health advice and support for any efforts by the town to develop a housing development plan so that we'll be less vulnerable to 40B developments. And lastly, provide BOH advice and support for any efforts by the town to develop town water or sewer options in the town center.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Darryl?
So interestingly, there are a number of those things that I agree with wholeheartedly. Certainly on the topic of consistency and fairness, that is something that the board has always worked really hard to do with anyone coming before it. We're always referring back to like cases to review what went on with a prior issue to see, are we being consistent? So that is something that the board has been doing all along. Some of the other ideas about looking at our regulations and updating them, those are things that we have discussed at meetings in the last year or couple of years actually. And I think there are a number of ways that we could approach that. That is one of the things that I do want to look at. Going forward, I'll talk more about that later. And I do think that the board has had a very busy and demanding time in the last year or two. And that as good as the board has been over all the years in meeting new demands and challenges, these have been very big ones. And we do need to look at making even more changes so that we can address those. And part of that will be through regulations, and some of what I've been doing is looking at the regulations that other towns have that I think that we could also borrow from, in addition to hiring experts who could weigh in on that, scientific experts. But there are ideas that other towns have implemented who have been ahead of the curve from us on dealing with some of these issues, and they've worked some of these things out already. And as I read them, I see that we could really benefit from taking advantage of that.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess I would just say that I think it is great that Daryl and I agree on some of these things that I've articulated. But I know, for example, there's one regulation that we very much agree on, and that is a zero tolerance approach to measurements of a chemical, which doesn't, I think Daryl will agree, that for many of these chemicals doesn't make any sense. But what I would say is the Board of Health, and I brought this up 2 years ago, the Board of Health has been talking about doing this for several years. And I think we need someone in the seat who's going to get things accomplished. And I think I can do that. Thank you.
Bob did not bring the issue up. The board had already been discussing it and discussing various approaches. It's not a simple issue to resolve. And frankly, I researched and came up with some ways that we could go about it. We're now pursuing that within the Board of Health in terms of pegging our standards against EPA standards, so it gives some flexibility to change as the EPA changes and develops new scientific information about things. We just kind of float along with that, and we don't have to go on a hard and fast number. And also what he's talking about on zero tolerance is that when the board first set up these regulations long before my time on the board, they used zero tolerance for volatile organic chemicals because they are particularly toxic. However, the detection limits for those set of chemicals has gone down over time. So therefore, meeting zero can sometimes be very difficult. But we also have the situation where people are testing their wells once. The drinking water standards that typically exist are set up assuming that it's more of a public water supply where it's routine testing all the time. So the intent of the board long ago, I believe, was to have a cushion. So you don't say you can, if it's 10 is the limit of what you'd want to drink, that when you first test your well, 10, you meet the standard, that's okay. But what if it creeps up? What if you're not monitoring over time? So that was how we ended up with zero in the past, is that they didn't want to have people starting out at 10 and not realizing that maybe a plume was moving into their drinking water area. So it's a little bit of the background of what
one of
the details
one of the place we find ourselves in with this particular issue is, and I can give you very precise answers about this. 100 parts per million is an EPA drinking water standard, or excuse me, 100 parts per billion. Okay, so if the 100 parts per billion is the EPA standard for drinking water, if you have 1 part per billion, because it comes off some electrical tape that was wrapping an electrical wire to the pole that goes down, and you have 1 part, when the EPA says, I get what Daryl's saying, 100 may not be the right answer, but 0 is certainly not the right answer. And you as residents, if you get 1 part out of 100, and 100's okay, you can end up being forced to pay $50,000 for a mitigation system in your house. Does that make any sense? To me, it's not a law or regulation that makes any sense.
And hence the reason that the board is formulating now a new approach that we plan to vet at a public hearing, so people can come and make comments on it as well. So,
Okay, thank you both. Question, are you happy with the current structure of the Board of Health and the way it provides services to the town residents and builders?
Well, this was my question, so I think Daryl should go first.
I think the Board of Health is fortunate that we have a very hardworking and knowledgeable staff. It's been a pleasure to work with them. The board and again, a lot of this, it's a long-standing board. I am not a long-standing board member. There are a lot of procedures that have evolved over time. I know that changes are continually being made, tweaks to try and address new circumstances and situations that have come along. Since 2000, roughly, and especially since 9/11, the demands on the board have continued to increase. They're new, as Peter Lifferton, a former board member, always used to like to say, there are unfunded mandates that were always coming out, that the board needed to rise and meet. So really, without increasing the budget, these new demands were met, and that was met through trying to have process efficiency and learning and getting better systems within the board. And I think that's been pretty good, but I think the last year has shown us that we have a whole new set of challenges coming. And I do think that we need to make some adjustments. I think I'll talk more about that later with some of the other questions about some of the things that are on the horizon for us to do. I will also say that we do have an administrator who is an excellent resource. I don't know that people always view her as the resource that she is for technical information. Now, the engineers who come in frequently to the board know that they can get all sorts of information from her. Not soil evaluation, but really anything else one needs about knowing what the processes are and how to work through the very complicated aspects of Board of Health regulations. Okay, thank you.
So it won't come as any surprise to anyone that I'm not happy with the current Board of Health office structure or the way services are provided. As I mentioned a minute ago, timeliness of response, kind of a communication that works. The health agent, I believe, and I've been saying this for years, and maybe it was Daryl's idea as well, the health agent needs to work in town hall and be available to coordinate with the Conservation Commission, the building department, planning, and others during business hours. We need to have a presence of the health agent in town. We need that, and we've never had that in the past. The health agent needs to communicate directly with residents and builders. For years and years and years, when you write an email and you want to communicate with the health agent, you have to write to the health administrator. She retypes the email and sends it to Mark's personal email address, and then Mark, from his personal email address, sends Ellen back the answer. Ellen then takes the answer and retypes it into an email and sends it back to the Board of Health client. This is not an efficient process for our town. It's not an efficient communication for our town. It's broken. It doesn't work. We may need more agent hours and fewer administrative hours. We need more expertise in the office. I actually disagree with Daryl in that my experience has been in dealing with the administrator that she doesn't have answers and doesn't want to answer technical questions. You need the agent to answer those questions, to work out situations. And lastly, I'll just say that I believe that the BOH agent there needs to be more accountability. The hours need to be documented and monitored. And I think a big start to that would be having the work occur in town hall instead of in the agent's home or in the Ashland Board of Health office. I don't know where it occurs, but it doesn't occur for the most part in town hall. Thank you.
I would like to just note that I think that the email exchange between the administrator and the Board of Health agent is somewhat misstated. Part of the reason for communications going through the administrator is so that there is someone who understands all the activity that are going on with projects and can help to coordinate and facilitate. So I make it a policy to also copy this person on all communications that I have, because that is the way it should be done, so that someone is keeping track of things. And the idea that everything is being retyped many times over is not quite the case. Also, the health agent is extraordinarily accountable, now provides very detailed information about what is done, but I'd also say that the Board of Health over the years sits down with the agent twice a month at meetings, sees that this person is prepared with all the projects, is always ready to answer questions, has gone through the material in detail. We ask questions, we get responses. We know what that person is doing because we witness the fruits of those labors each time we have a meeting, and that we're relying on their expertise and then providing the information back. And darn, there's one other point. That was important.
In the meantime, I'm going to stand by. I can trot out 500 emails that were done that way. I have them. I do a lot of communicating with the Board of Health. That is how the emails happen.
Okay, we're moving on to another question. I'm actually going to combine the next two. I think each of you submitted bits and pieces that relate to this. The first question is, do you think the current Board of Health regulations serve the town well, or do they need changes? And then the other of you submitted a question, does Sherborn need Board of Health regulations that exceed state requirements? So I think I'll bundle those two together, if I may, and either one of you are welcome to tackle that first.
Okay. I'll talk about, I'll talk about exceeding state requirements, because that seems to be a big topic of concern. I will say that the vast majority of the regulations that we enforce in town and that folks need to follow are, on the septic side, are state level regulations. I think some of the arguments about everything seeming to be at the discretion of the Board of Health or the town of Sherborn is not quite right. But I will say that these are really complicated technical regulations. And I think that perhaps the frustration with trying to get through something that is that complex then seems to come back to, well, maybe we're enforcing them wrong, or we're choosing levels that are inappropriate. For example, we have a depth to groundwater that is greater than the state minimum. However, it is much like other towns that, like Sherborn, have well and septic. And frankly, there are towns out there that have 6 feet to groundwater, not 5. So we're not even as stringent as some other towns. The way that federal and state regulations get set up is that the people formulating those regulations have to look at something that would be most broadly applicable across lots of different situations. So in terms of depth to groundwater, you're going to say for protecting the groundwater, if you're discharging sewage into the ground, what would be an appropriate level to set that would be protective, but without going so far that for towns where they're getting their water from Quabbin across the state, it's not as critical in terms of what you're doing. And so the reason we have an extra protection is because we are we are both discharging sewage and drinking water from the same properties. Thank you.
So I'll stay with the does Sherborn need requirements that exceed the state, but I would like to definitely go back to the topic of BOH regulations and do they serve the town. But let's hit this one first. So with regard to the 5 feet depth to groundwater, Daryl's right that it is a foot more difficult to achieve than the state, and I'm not aware of towns with 6, but I take her at her word that they exist, and that's fine. In many ways, I don't have a particular problem with the 5 foot to groundwater. That is not an issue. The issue is that in Sherborn you're not allowed to do a raised system. Okay, so the problem with that is that in another town, if you have 6 feet and you can raise the system, you can still build on that land. And in our town, 5 feet would be plenty. But the real issue is the raised system. And it's the raised system where we're very, very different from other towns. And it's one of the reasons that the groundwater adjustment is not a big issue in a lot of other towns. In a lot of other towns, they kind of negotiate with builders or homeowners to come up with the groundwater, but it's not a big fight. And the reason it's not a big fight is because it's not a life or death topic, okay? In another town, if it's at 3 feet or 5 feet or 2 feet or 6 feet, it's okay because you can still build a single family home on that property. In our town, we can't do that. And therefore, the depth to groundwater becomes a life or death issue. And so, to me, I don't want to focus on the 5 feet. The 5 feet's not important. What's important is, do we have the distance to be safe? And it's my understanding, I am not a scientist. Daryl is a scientist, and my guess is she's going to tell me why I'm wrong in just a second. But from my perspective, I've been told by experts that it is safer to have a raised system than a not raised system. Thank you.
For raised systems, the state has a requirement that you use something called sewer gravel. That's a particular type of material. Typically, you use sewer gravel right beneath the pipes, and the purpose of it is that it quickly moves water away so that you don't get backing up around those pipes. It's that if that's what you're using to build up the distance, it's not performing a cleansing function because it's just quickly moving the water away and down until you hit the naturally occurring soils, which are typically recognized or generally recognized as being better at treating discharges. There's more add and absorption possible. There's more biological activity, and just the dynamics there end up treating the water better. And so the requirement of having to use sewer gravel, I just think, is counter to. It doesn't really buy you much. It gives you a measurable distance, but not a performing distance.
So, Daryl, could you name a couple of towns around us that prohibit a raised system?
I have to tell you, I have not researched that, so I
Because there aren't
could.
any. There aren't any.
And there are also very few towns that have well and septic on the same property. Very few.
Bob, did you want to pick up?
Sure.
More on
Let's see.
Well,
So,
yeah.
sorry,
Okay.
just to finish, the overall question, does Sherborn need requirements that exceed state requirements? The answer is, I think yes. There are requirements where we should go beyond. But it's my view that we need to take a step back and go through all of the places where we're more difficult. And in fact, there's actually a state law that says there needs to be scientific evidence. If we're going to have a more difficult regulation, this is on Title V, if we're going to have a more difficult regulation than Title V, it has to be based on science. And frankly, I've heard of folks out there in our community who have had their land impaired by this Board of Health, who may be ready to sue on that topic. Now, I don't think litigation is a good way to solve these issues. I think kind of a better governance process is the way to solve them. But you have to have science by state law if you're going to exceed Title V. I think there probably, I agree with Daryl. There are differences in our town. We do have more wells and septics on the same properties, and in some cases 1 acre properties. I get all of those things. I'm not saying there aren't a few places where we need to be different, but we need to know why we're different. And let me just ask one more question on that, and that is, why do we need to have a different definition of a bedroom in Sherborn than in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? We have a different definition of bedroom. Why? A bedroom's a bedroom in my mind, and yet our regulations are different than the state, and I don't get that. And by the way, if you wanted to know in the regulations where that definition of a bedroom is, it's in a section titled 7.1, leaching area size. So if you're looking for the definition of a bedroom, go to section 7.1, leaching area size.
Which makes a lot of sense because number of bedrooms is exactly how the state, and not just our state, determines leaching area size. Number of bedrooms is the key factor and it all flows from there, so that's why it's there. The thing I'd like to point out is that the thing I'd like to point out is that for existing homes or existing developed properties in Sherborn, every effort is made to find a system that will work. Variances are granted, Title V, even variances to Title V are granted depending on the circumstances that a property faces. So no one will be denied the right to continue to live at their property. So what we're talking about are undeveloped properties.
That's new construction, that's right. Yeah. For new construction, the Board of Health has been very proud over its history to tell all of us that they do not give variances for new construction, no matter the circumstances. And we're going to get into in a little while, I hope, about why that is creating a huge problem for our town right now, how it's impairing land and causing it to become less valuable and therefore cheap for multifamily 40B developers to buy. And it's coming up in a hurry at us. And in many ways, my election to the Board of Health, if that happens, is not going to get us out of the Coolidge Street situation or the Field situation, but it could get us out of a future situation. And I'm beside myself on this topic. Do I have some more time?
On the same subject, or?
Well, I still would like to talk about, you put them together, and my preference would be
Okay.
that we go back to the question about do the BOH regulations serve the town?
All right, let's do that, and we'll
You
let.
want me to go first, Darrell, or do you
Sure.
want- Okay. So I would tell you about the regulations specifically, that they read and look like they were written by a group of volunteers over 50 years. There's a reason they look and feel that way, because they were. And it's time that we take a step back and we take a full look at them. And we, like I said, there are going to be some where we're going to want to keep those regulations in place because there are reasons to keep them in place. But I can tell you, if you read this document, and this is, this is my well-worn copy of it. Another thing I would say about it is that 30% of our Board of Health regulations are regulations applying to tattoo parlors. Yes, actually, Peter? 30% of the pages in this document apply to the regulation of tattoo parlors. I'm just lost. So anyway, I guess what else do I want to say about that? The definition of bedroom we talked about, zero tolerance, we touched on that. At the end of the day, we need a better set of laws than this. We need a 21st century set of laws, and that is an extraordinarily high priority for me if I'm elected.
So tattoo, here's where that one comes from. The state said every town shall regulate tattoo parlors. The town was obligated to develop those regulations. Same with massage therapy. I got to research those and look at other towns, which was a bit interesting to see different provisions for bright lights and doors being open and all sorts of things from the Boston level regulations. Didn't think that quite fit our town, at least I hoped not. So that's where those regulations come from. They were borrowed from other towns and then tailored somewhat to us. So it's kind of a meaningless thing to talk about how many pages out of our regulations are devoted to that. I would like to highlight, though, our tobacco regulations in case people didn't know. The recent things that were passed about age for sales to kids, really, to move the age up to 21, and also to prohibit the sale of individual cigarettes or cigars, because kids don't have a lot of money. They tend to go out and buy things one at a time, so things had to be bundled and have a certain value. And no flavored cigarettes, because the doctors on our boards and doctors who came to speak to the board felt that that was absolutely marketing to children. Grape smelling things, people brought in samples of it. I was amazed you couldn't even detect that there was tobacco there, and it really is just to entice and get kids hooked. Sherborn was the first town to pass the anti-flavored one. And now that, and really it's been a town-by-town effort, but it's gained enough momentum that it looks like the age of sale to 21 might be changing across the state. So, and Sherborn was recently highlighted in some public health magazine regarding that. Thank you.
On the topic of the tobacco regulations, I would say that Daryl and I couldn't agree more. I'm 100% in favor of those regulations. I came to the hearings and was supportive of them. Allison, my wife, wrote a number of lengthy pieces, one requested by Daryl and by Chris Quinn. I think Chris was maybe more the author of those, but I think that we couldn't agree more. So I'm not sure that's a place where we should spend much time, because you all need to know the differences, not the similarities between us.
Okay, if we can move on. What challenges does the Board of Health face?
Me? Okay. I already mentioned really the complexity of the regulations. I just think that is the challenge. That's what we wrestle with all the time. We spend a lot of time, people come in, we talk about what their situation is, what their options are. If you do this, then you can do that. If you do that, then this regulation, this part of the regulations applies. A lot of time is spent on that. I would say that the goal to keep our budget in line and keep it as low as possible is a challenge. We're a small town. Right now, the agent's hours are in the 10 to 15 hours a week. There are different times a year that goes up and down depending on workload. It's hard to anticipate what the workload will be. We have a fixed budget. We don't know at the beginning of the year how many applications are going to come in. And last year, I believe it was something around 125-ish, and it had been in the maybe 80 to 100 range for a few years before that, roughly. Those are very rough numbers. I don't have them memorized. So trying to make sure that we can address all the needs that come before us throughout the year is a tough thing to do. Also, one application does not require the same amount of time as another application, and we certainly saw that recently with the fields. Always trying to be consistent and fair, and really to represent the neighbors is something that's important, because I think a lot of people are expecting the board to do that job of representing their interests. And we do have people who approach us. They don't want to get into disputes with their neighbors. They just want to make sure that their interests are being protected, their health interests. So those, I would say, are some of the major challenges that we face. Thank you.
So I'm going to break the challenges down to if Daryl is reelected or if I'm elected, because I think they're going to be a little bit different. Well, and some of them will be the same, obviously. Certainly, we all know there are going to be additional 40B projects that are going to need to be reviewed. That's a given. And it is probably going to be more than the ones that we know about right now. In fact, I know it will be more than the ones we know about right now. I believe that we're going to end up getting sued, certainly, by the fields developer. We're going to get sued over the denial of the Title V permit. So there's going to be legal stuff going on there. I happen to think they're going to prevail in court. I don't want them to prevail in court, but I think it's fairly likely they're going to prevail in court. If I'm elected, the challenge is going to be there's going to be a very, very significant amount of work by both what I hope will be a citizens committee as well as the board itself to rewrite these regulations. That is no small task. And it's in part why it hasn't been done in the past, is it's going to be a lot of work. If I'm on the board, I'm willing to take on that work, and I'm willing to find the people who will also take on the work and get this done, because it is critical to the future of this town. Someone asked me, Bob, why don't you run for selectman? I said, because the BOH has a lot more influence on the future of this town right now than a selectman. And no offense, Mike, if you're still here. I really believe that. this seat has a huge impact on the future of the town. So anyway, that's going to be a big challenge. I'm willing to take it on. I also think that the Board of Health is about to go through a search for a health agent, and that's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be the work of thinking about what the process should be, and there's going to be a lot of work in going out and finding the right person for that job. That's going to be a lot of work too. Thank you.
Darrell, do you have anything further on
that? Lots. How many minutes would I have? Where to begin? I think I'll cover it in the, I assume you're going through all the questions,
Yes,
I'll just
yeah.
keep it together.
All right, fine.
Thank you.
Do Board of Health regulations hinder development?
Okay, I think I actually did cover some of that earlier in terms of most of the regulations are state level, with the exception of the well regulations, because the state does not have regulations for private water supplies. They did issue years ago model regulations, and the town did adopt that for the most part. I don't view the regulations as trying to promote or hinder development. All it's trying to say is that the development needs to happen in a way that doesn't compromise our health, because if we create a problem of some sort, it's really too late. It's very hard to go back. It's very costly to change. If health impacts have already happened in the interim, then that's clearly something that is not always reparable. Also, I think that the references to the developments coming into town, because there is no alternative of what can be done with certain properties unless they go 40B, both 59 North Main Street, which we hear is also going to be a 40B, was already approved for a number of new homes. It qualified under the town. It could be developed, and it looks like that is not the route that is going to be chosen. The same with the fields at Sherborn, although there were no engineering studies presented about that property. This is my estimation without having that detailed analysis, but I believe that it could have supported some number of homes complying with our regulations, and yet that was not the route that was taken. Thank you.
I'm not going to get this done in 2 minutes, but I'll do what I can, and maybe we can circle back to it. Our town regulations do not in any way hinder 40B development. That needs to be really clear, okay? Our town regulations have no impact on 40B development. They lead to it. Our town regulations do, in fact, hinder the type of development many folks, not everyone. There were a few people the other night at town meeting who, I think it's fair to say, don't want to see anything built in town. But they're, you know, these rules are hindering development for single-family homes on good-sized lots or multifamily projects in town center and appropriate locations. Okay, the regulations do that. They become a significant problem for good projects when they're enforced and interpreted in an inconsistent, unfair, and non-transparent manner. You know, I can give you a property that is, I'm pretty sure this is public, up on Green Lane. There's a property about 20 odd acres. And somebody called me and they said, Bob, come and take a look at it. And so I did, and I walked it, and I talked to the guy about it, and I looked at the testing that's been done on this property. Beautiful piece of property. And I know the guy who owns it, and the guy doesn't have a whole lot of money. But he has this piece of property, and he'd like to sell it. And he asked me, you know, could we do some single-family homes there? Could, you know, I'm not really in that business, but I really wanted to help the guy out. I looked at the thing, and it just was so obvious that under our regulations, and even more importantly, under our process, that it was never going to happen. He's been pushing on this for years and years and years. And you know what? About 3 months ago, he told me, I ran into him one day across town, and he said, I'm going to sell it to someone. He got a terrible price for the land. Terrible price. All the guy wanted to do was to build 2 or 3 single-family homes. Instead, we're going to get a 40B that we're going to have to spend a year fighting with. Maybe we win, maybe we lose. Could have been 2 or 3 single-family homes that would have kept him happy. That's wrong.
I would be interested to hear you elaborate on what particular part of the process was a problem and what was inconsistent, because again, from what I've seen, the board is not being inconsistent. It works very hard to be consistent, and it's easy to say that it's not, but...
I guess I'll just be really brief because we don't have time for it, but the agent found modeling that the engineer didn't agree with.
Well, there are certain engineers who evaluate things different ways, and the engineer and the agent, and perhaps a different engineer than you're referring to, were in agreement.
And all of my engineers, the various engineers I've used, never have the same point of view as our health agent. But all I'm saying is 2 or 3 single-family lots, we get the tax revenue on them, they're attractive, they fit in our community, and instead we're going to get 25 or 30 not as attractive units on that property. And I just think this is getting to the heart of why I'm here tonight.
Bob, if I may, because I think maybe I got a little confused, but I thought a short while ago you said something about our regulations are not the cause of 20Bs taking.
Well, I said our regulations will not stop 40Bs because 40Bs are not subject to our regulations. Sorry.
So your contention is that the regulations do have an impact on.
Well, yes, the regulations in their difference from the state, and again, going back, I'm not in favor of getting rid of all of them. I'm in favor of looking at the science. Because frankly, if we're going to get a 40B, then I want to know what the science is that's telling us we can't have 3 single-family homes on that property. That's how I'm approaching it.
Frankly, the fields at Sherborn did not pass even under the state. In terms of how the board evaluated it, had very real problems. So it's a bit of comparing different things.
Yeah. I honestly have not studied the fields. It wasn't a project that, like I said, I looked at the property on Green Lane because the gentleman asked me to.
Right, and the board spent a lot of time listening to anything that the applicant would want to present as information to evaluate, and we spent a lot of time in serious consideration and weighing the science and looking at the consistency, what for us was consistency across the various pieces of technical information presented that all pointed to significant risk. Now, whether a court views that in the same way and how science is interpreted elsewhere is hard to say, but in terms of protecting the future residents of that project in particular, it was important for the Board of Health to make that decision. And in terms of being sued, there were possibilities of being sued for not protecting the future residents of that property.
I think we should go on, George, on this topic just a little bit. I think it's really.
Yeah, I will say this. I have another question that's been submitted. I also have one from the audience that I want to get in, but I would like to cut this at 9:30.
Okay. Can I just give one more example, because I don't want to stay with just one. So Green Lane was a property, as I told you, that I looked at. Now I'll talk for just a minute about the process on Abbey Road, and I don't want to spend much time on it, but I'll just tell you a quick story. So when we dug the holes, the test holes for Abbey Road, we dug down 14 feet. 14 feet, and we found groundwater. Okay? Now the rule in town that we've been talking about is 5 feet. And so I said to myself, when I watched the guy dig down 14 feet, I said, we're all set. This shouldn't take too long. Because we were 9 feet below the requirement of depth to groundwater. Abbey Road fought with Mark Orem and the Board of Health for close to a year on whether the groundwater adjustment was 9 feet. Now, I'm not a scientist, but common sense would tell me if that groundwater was really moving 9 feet, those railroad tracks would be well underwater in the springtime. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. Ultimately, the Board of Health overruled the health agent, but the damage had been done. I'd spent 10 months and $25,000 on engineers who just rolled their eyes and laughed about the process. 14 feet. And we debated about whether 9 feet was the groundwater adjustment. To me, it was silly. The town, in that 1 year delay, lost $250,000 of tax revenue. $250,000 of tax revenue because of that delay. Obviously, I apologize that I'm frustrated, but that's why I'm sitting here, because I think we can do better.
All right, I'm now going to, I feel compelled to break a policy I have, which is to really not go into detail, certain kinds of details about projects, because I know that coming before the Board of Health is stressful. Complying with our regulations can be expensive. So certain things happen, people interpret things certain ways and make claims about the Board of Health. And ordinarily I would not comment, but I feel I must comment in this case. The process was not as difficult, I don't think, as you portrayed. The hole was dug. Here's what happens. You dig a hole. Frankly, we've been having really drought conditions in the past few years. What you do when you dig a hole, you try and figure out where, if you see water, you have to make an adjustment on how that water level fits into a historical context. Now, all right, so this is just going to involve getting into a bit of the technical weeds, but so that's the adjustment that he's talking about. Why should it have to be 9 feet? The USGS, United States Geologic Service, has monitoring wells throughout the area, and you see one that's in a valley or on a hillside, something that is comparable to what your digging spot was. And then you look at what kind of adjustments they're applying. They're saying, this year we're 5 feet below the historic high groundwater, and that's the adjustment you apply to your well. There's a standard way that we use those adjustments. It's in Title V. It suggests what the methods are that you use. FRMTR, as was referred to earlier, that's in the state regulations, well recognized. It is one
And this
of the,
technology from 1987.
and there are not really alternatives at the moment, which is another story. But in any case, the discussions, I'm sorry, he's spent a lot of time, I am going to go longer. The discussions did not take as long as said. Frankly, what the agent does is he does a very straight evaluation according to our regulations exactly, and the consistency in terms of how it's always been done in the past. And then he advises applicants that they can come before the board if they would like us to exercise some discretion or look at other factors. It's good to have an agent who is very clear on what his role is. He can't exercise that discretion. It has to come before the board. So that's a good thing. It was brought before the board. They had a good hydrogeologist who had other evidence and information to adjust the factor that we would normally apply because there were extenuating circumstances. The board listened to that, took one meeting, we decided, we approved it, moved on. Whether you wrestled with it elsewhere is another story, and that the agent would tell you this is a standard factor, go before the board, and that's what happened. It was taken care of.
Okay, the hydrologist that we hired on the project was also the hydrologist that was hired to represent the town and or the neighbors on the Fields project. Very, very conservative hydrologist. And he did not think much of our process when we went through it with that.
Let me move on to another question, if I may. For both of you, what program updates do you see on the horizon for the Board of Health?
Okay, so I'll take this. Bob was talking about having a committee and revising all the regulations. I actually view it a little bit differently. I think there's some needs that we have that are very immediate, and I think there's some changes that we should make much more quickly than sending it into committee and other kinds of study for a while, because I do think that we're pretty close to some of the information on some points, and we have, as I mentioned, that those things that we can borrow from other towns and at least get them in. Wouldn't be 100%, but there's some critical things that we need to address. In particular, our regulations weren't really set up for the details that we're facing now with multi-unit developments. And so there are things that we confirm up there and codify. Also, as we have talked about earlier, the well regulations, and another immediate change that I'd like to see is something that is done quite well informally on the individual projects that we've been seeing, but I think for the larger projects, it seems like they're coming before the town now. And I've already brought this up with town administrators and some other departments in town, is having the multi-department and committee and other employee meetings to go over these so that we can be more organized for dealing with these larger projects. So, and then in the longer term, well, there's one thing that, as a result of town meeting, that there's going to be some sort of study about just regulatory processes in town, and so we're looking forward to working on that and seeing what things might be streamlined for us or what we could learn. The board also frequently looks at other towns and how they're doing things in their boards of health, just to see if we can get ideas. So that's not unfamiliar to us. It's not an easy thing. There's no magic model anywhere out there, and each town has enough little differences that the devil's in the details. And okay, I'll stop and maybe revisit something.
So I guess I'd just like to spend a minute, because I think a lot of times people ask about, the regulatory, but you talk about programmatic changes, and I guess I would compare and contrast the experience of the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, which are two of the other major boards that I've dealt with on various projects. Sorry. And I guess what I would say about that is that the regulatory process was quite different. And it was different, I think, in part because of the structure of the organizations. As I said, one of my grave concerns is that the health agent expertise is not resident in town hall. With the planning board, you have Gino, you have the planning board, the town planner in town hall for, I don't know what the hours are, but it's a reasonable number of hours per week. You have the Conservation Commission agent in town hall. Now, Conservation Commission in our town is known as being a really difficult board in terms of their regulations. They enforce their regulations in a really tough way. But my experience was I could talk to them. We could work through their concerns, and I could deal with their challenges. It's because there was an agent that was there who knew the regulations. She was tough, but she knew the regulations, she articulated them to us, and we got the issues resolved, and we moved on. The planning board was the same thing. The town planner was there, we dealt with them, they were tough. The planning board was hard. They're all powerful on a project like ours. They can make every decision, and we had to work through all those things. But we did it in a really professional, in an articulate, in a really, really good way. In fact, we had a really difficult conversation with the planning board about the parsonage house. Many of you are aware of this conversation that we had with them. Really, really tough, hard thing for us and for the planning board to deal with. We had a bunch of Boy Scouts in the room, and I was proud at the end of the night that we showed those Boy Scouts how to do it right, how to have a conversation, how to articulate all the views in the room and get to a decision.
Dara, do you want to follow up on any of this? I didn't mean to have you cut off. No.
Yes and no.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is what I'll do. Let me, we are running short of time. There have been some questions that were submitted kind of somewhat last minute here from the audience. I'm going to take one of them that was given to me quite a while ago because I think it's sort of interesting, and I'm sorry to throw each of you a curve because you don't know the question, but simply is this. In recent past, there was a recommendation that the town move from a 3-person Board of Selectmen to a 5-person, and obviously the board bought into that, and the town now does have a 5-person Board of Selectmen. A suggestion or a question that's being posed is, how do you feel about that notion possibly for the Board of Health going forward?
If you'd like to.
I am very much in favor of a 5-person Board of Health. I think that there's a lot of work to get done on the board, especially under, if I were to get the chance to try to implement my goals, very, very much in favor of it. I think it spreads the decision-making, it spreads the work, it just makes a ton of sense.
Darrell, do you have
I have to say I don't have a really strong opinion, but I will say that there are 2 things. There is a lot of work for the board. There's a tremendous amount going on, and certainly with the fields it was a burden. It was a burden. And it is also a complexity. The board only speaks when it's at public meetings. That can make it a little hard. We have a limited amount of time to respond to things, so when people talk about things taking too long, really, we are legally obligated, once a completed application is in front of us, we have a time limit on deciding on that. And so having to muse and explore with a sea of faces looking at you is a little harder. Except on the flip side, I think it's good because everybody sees everything we're thinking. There's nothing going on behind the scenes. It's all out there. So to me, it's a mixture. And I think the discussion, if I recall correctly, at the Board of Selectmen was something about further evaluation on how other boards of health or size of town and other factors to look at that before moving ahead.
I think at this point I would just simply ask each of you if you take a couple of minutes to sort of wrap up with any particular special comment or plea you'd like to make. Bob, I'll let you go.
Sure. The one thing that I've never run for anything in my life, but the one thing I'm very proud about in this process thus far is I've worked very, very hard to articulate why I want to do this, what I want to do, and what our town can get out of my serving in this role. And I've articulated that on the website, which you'll be able to find if you just ask a neighbor. And I've put a lot of time into it because I think if you don't agree with me, if you're worried that I'm going to be too easy and let a bunch of developers come in and destroy our town, then vote for Darrell. But what I'm telling you, I believe is the truth. And I think what Darrell's telling you, she believes in the truth, is the truth. And I think you all just have to decide which plan you like better, because they're quite different. I'd appreciate an opportunity. If not, I'll just continue to be the gadfly.
Darrell.
Thank you.
Sometimes I liken going into Board of Health meetings to having a night of brain teasers and trying to figure things out. It's complicated, it's interesting. I enjoy the participation and the interaction with the applicants, with people in town who come in to help weigh in and sometimes bring new perspectives and new ideas. And I like that, and I care about Sherborn. And again, part of it, truly, we may have different perspectives and backgrounds, is as part of my work, I see when things go wrong, it's not good, and often there are things that could be anticipated, and I want to work on prevention. I don't want to work on cleaning things up later. I want to work on prevention and development that's keeping that in mind. and recognizing that there are real environmental limitations on things, and that is my perspective. And our health is important, and the long term. I also am looking at this for the long term, because we won't always see the impacts in the short term. But if we want our kids to move back here and be healthy and that sort of thing, then we need to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said to the school committee candidates as well, I certainly want to thank both of you for putting in a lot of time. I know you put in a lot of time in town affairs anyway, but particularly in this election, it's a lot of work. We really appreciate both of you and what you do for the town, and thank you very much. I do want to just say a quick thank you to people who organized this evening, most notably Grace Shepard, Bob Delaney, Frank Jenkins, Tom Urmston, Jim Campbell, Mary Wolfe, and again, Pat Cassell for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much for coming, and thank you to the candidates, and most of all, thank you to George Fiske. He did a grand job.